Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Center for Architecture and Metropolitan Planning. Welcome to CAMP. Thank you very much that you decided to join our lecture. If you decided to watch the stream, welcome to CAMP. You will have a chance to ask questions to our dear guest. You will raise your hand. We will bring you a microphone. If you are watching on stream, you had a chance too. You can use slido.com. Today's lecture will present you a work of Renzo Piano Building Workshop. Our dear guest is partner and director there, and it's Albert Girault. We will talk about projects that are related to our exhibition partly, and we will talk about projects in London and in Tokyo, about its similarities and differences, and you will be able to ask questions about them. So once again, thank you very much for your time. And now I would like to give the floor to Albert Girault. Welcome to CAMP, Albert. Thank you very much that you decided to join the lecture, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Pleasure. Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure being here today and having the opportunity to explain what's our design philosophy and also to give a glimpse of what's our working process. And to do that, I thought it would be a good idea to go through three concepts which are important for us. And after that, to go through three case studies, which also will serve to show you what's the way in which we work, what are the themes that we like to work on. So the first concept or notion that I wanted to explore with you today is the notion of workshop. It's not by chance that we are called Renzo Piano Building Workshop, and we all know that to do great buildings, the first thing we need is great ideas. But between that great idea and the final project, there's this enormous amount of workmanship that takes that first idea and makes it evolve. The idea gets contaminated by other ideas. And then like this, the project grows rich. And that process is a process of research, of trial and error, iterative seeking for the correct answer for the project. And we believe that the notion of workshop, it embodies very well that research. And there's lots of tools to go through this research. We use hand drawing, we use digital drawings, of course, as well. But there's something that we really like to use, especially at the beginning of the project, and this is the physical models, because the physical models is something that you can manipulate with your hands. You can do lots of iterations pretty quickly, and they allow you to test different massings, different scales of the building, different proportions. And sometimes even while you are trying with your hands, you may find something unexpected, and then that initial idea that you had, it diverges to something unexpected, and that's the magic of this approach. Another important element of that research, that idea of workshop, is detailing, but not detailing understood as something that you did at the end of the design phases, the detailing of the building before you start construction. Detailing understood as those aspects of the building that from the very beginning of the design, you want to capture details that represent the essence of the building. And then those details that you start drafting from the beginning, they evolve with the rest of the design. And that's the best way to finally get to a very well crafted building when it gets built. There's detailing, and there's also, in this notion of workshop, one-to-one prototypes that we do in our facilities in Genoa. The opportunity for us architects, but also for the clients to see for the first time the materiality, the scale and the atmosphere of what we are planning to create. And finally, in this process of research construction, we love construction sites. It's when things get real, and we like very much to be there. So we are next to the executive architect, making sure that all the decisions we take, they align with the character, with the essence of the project that we are trying to build. And that's the first notion of workshop. We have another meaning. We give another meaning to the word workshop. One was that process, that research. And the other meaning is the fact that the buildings are the result of a collective effort. It's the architect, it's not just the architect having the brilliant idea, it's really a choral of people, each one of them bringing their expertise, and that includes the clients. We need good clients to do good buildings, engineers. Everyone needs to sit around the table and bring their best in order to get to the best possible building. Then the second notion I wanted to go through with you is the notion of what does it mean to build sustainably or to build responsibly. And we take a very broad view on what this means for us, building responsibly. In a nutshell, is improving the life of those people using the building or being affected by the presence of the building, and doing that respecting what was already there before we started building. If we go into this notion of building responsibly with more detail, the first thing that I would like to say is the idea of resiliency, building buildings that can sustain earthquakes, typhoons, and that will be there for hundreds of years, flexible enough to anticipate problems that may occur in the future. The building responsibly is also erecting buildings that participate in the social life of the city where they are built, buildings that are open to the people and that encourage exchanges between people, etc. Building responsibly is, for us, is also never trying to impose a signature, an architectural signature onto a place. On the contrary, each building needs to have its own character, its essence, but that character that defines the building needs to be in harmony, in tune with the place where this building is being built. And that's true, be it in Malta or be it in New Caledonia, or even in the vineyards in the south of France. Building responsibly is also building with the well-being of people at heart, and is also building meaningfully. The buildings have a function, a primary function, like a bridge connects two sides of a river in this case, but they also need to bring meaning for people to love the constructions that we do, the buildings that we do. The buildings will need to carry a certain meaning. In the case of the bridge, this bridge connects two sides of a river, but it also commemorates the victims of the collapse of the previous bridge that was there. Building responsibly is also triggering urban regeneration beyond the building that we are erecting. So the building needs to bring something positive, not only on the site where it's being built, but also around it. Building responsibly is obviously respecting the natural habitats where we are intervening. And finally, is harvesting green energy as much as possible and building with local materials and low carbon. And the third notion that I wanted to go through with you today is the notion of movement. That idea of movement is ingrained in our architecture from the first projects of the practice, and is this idea to experience the building in a promenade is how you really navigate through the building that makes the project interesting. Sometimes that notion of movement is not explicit from the outside. That's the case of a cultural foundation that was previously a power plant in Moscow. And what seems a power plant from the outside, when you get into the building, you discover a web of vertical and horizontal circulations that allow you to navigate and to discover the building from the inside. Lightweight walkways, staircases that are in harmony with the pre-existing structure of the power plant, light enough not to interfere with the steel and the clarity of the pre-existing building. On other occasions, that notion of movement becomes more explicit in the building when seen from outside. And that's the case of the courthouse in Paris, where a vertical spine, we can see that the massing almost is formed by this idea of expressing the movement. We have a vertical spine at the very middle of the building's elevation, and that's where the vertical core is set. And that vertical spine that we can see, this is the tracks of a panoramic lift going up and down. And then from that vertical spine, we can see the horizontal terraces extending sideways, and which gives you the opportunity to see the city of Paris in this landscape, from these landscape terraces. And finally, the solar panels as well, which emanate from that vertical spine and also define that horizontal circulation of the people trying to find their room from the central core. In other occasions, like in the Georges Pompidou Center, everything was put on the outside of the building so that the artwork, the interior of the building would be only dedicated to the contemplation of artwork. And in this gesture of getting everything outside the building, structure, services, also the circulations get outside the building, and they become the main feature of the main facade of the building, that escalator going up, and the introduction of the idea of promenade, something that you start from ground floor, and those escalators taking you up to the top floor. In other occasions, it's not one promenade that the building is offering. Sometimes is more than one promenade that is being offered. In this case, Centro Botín in Spain, the building is lifted off the ground some meters, and then from the center, you can see below the building the seaside promenade. So the first invitation the building is doing is this gesture of letting you go beneath the building to find the sea and to walk along the sea. But then parallel to this invitation to circulate beneath the building, there's this invitation. You can see the two masses of the building on both sides in a sort of welcoming gesture, almost. And then in the middle of the two main masses, you have that staircase, which takes you up to the entrance of the building, but also to something a bit more special, which is a sort of goal at the end of the promenade, which is that belvedere that oversails the sea and gives you those magic views of the Cantabrian Sea. Something similar happens in the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures in Los Angeles. We go through a museum, mostly in the dark, and when we reach the top floor, we take that bridge that links two buildings. We are suspended in the air, and then we make our way to that space, which is the culmination of the promenade, that space from which we have an amazing view of the city of Los Angeles. Sometimes it's not so much about inviting people to a promenade, but just offering different means to go from one end of the building to the other. And those different means, each one of them has its own characteristics. Here we see a bridge and we see a garden. Both devices takes you from one side of the school to the other. One serves to cross the complex very quickly, the bridge, and the other one invites you to wander around and to take your time and even to sit down. Something similar happens in the CERN in Switzerland, where different buildings are connected both through piazzas and elevated walkways, and each device invites a different kind of movement with a different speed, with a different pace. Sometimes you don't move anymore, and you just stand still, and then you look the movement deploy in front of you. That's the case when you go up. That photo is taken from Fondation Pinot in Paris, and you have a very nice view of the Pompidou Center. And from that perspective, you are not moving anymore, and then you see the people moving up and down the escalator and along the horizontal walkways, and that becomes a spectacle almost. And then there's another type of movement which is calmer, is quieter, and then architecture, the scale of it and the nature of it needs to accommodate to that quieter and calmer movement. And here in the cells for the nuns of the Roncham monastery, the winter gardens, that double layer, establishes a sequence between the interior and the exterior. You take the time to go from the interior to the exterior. And then sometimes there's no movement anymore, but even when there's no movement, there's at least the wind and the sunlight that may produce surprising glaring on certain metallic elements. I would like to start now with one of the case studies that I've prepared for today, is London Bridge Quarter. So this is a urban vision that has been built for a lapse of 25 years and through the construction of not one but 3 buildings. London Bridge Quarter, that complex, sits right next to London Bridge Station, one of the main stations in London. And it's composed by the Shard, which was the first building to be built there. And then it was the turn of the News Building, which in this image is the one on the right. And finally, a third building that has been delivered this year, which is the one in the middle, Shard Place, a residential building. And let's take a look at how was London Bridge Station before the intervention. We can see the station is that building white, which abuts against that sort of brown building, which is the bus station. We can see in this image and on the next one how there's no indication of urban space there. Everything is covered by roofs, and I'm going to go to the previous image, and the station instead of having a clear facade and a piazza in front, some quality urban space, it has nothing. It's even difficult to find it. That's how it looked like in plan before. That's the image on the right. We can see these big gray areas are the roof of the bus station, and that's the roof of the railway station. And we can see the pre-existing buildings and the almost total absence of urban realm. And that red dotted line is the boundary of the buildings that we are planning to build in that process that lasts 25 years. The Shard on the right-hand side, the News building on the left, and Shard Place in the middle. And what we are trying to achieve is what we can see in that other image. Our new buildings, that's a diagram that shows the intensity of movement, if you want. The more intense the orange, the yellows, the more intense the movement there. And we can see how the buildings hardly touch the ground. The boundary of the buildings outsails the public realm, and then the buildings only touch ground with the cores, and then the entrance lobbies that we need to access the building. The rest is liberated for the public in order to generate public realm. So by doing this, the first thing we can do is to demolish, obviously, that big roof, that big structure that was covering the bus station. And then we relocate the bus station partially under the News building, liberating all that central area so that we can have a central square at London Bridge. Then, by doing all that, we liberate the space to have a clear entrance to the station, to the railway station, as we'll see later. But we also need to be mindful of what happens underground. We are building on top of a maze of tunnels because we have two metro lines passing below our buildings, the Northern Line and the Jubilee Line. And that's another reason why the footprint of the buildings when they touch the ground is very limited. And on top of that, we need also at this level, at the lower level, we also need to improve all the circulations and the access to the metro stations by the construction of these three buildings, the Shard Place, and the News building. Here we have some photos of how was it before, and this is the roof of the bus station. The railway station is on the left, but we can hardly see it. And the other image shows that absolute absence of clarity and of urban realm. And that's an image from street level. We have seen two images from concourse level and from street level that the access to the LUL, to the metro, which to say the least is slightly dodgy. And this is a video that pictures what we have created with the erection of these three buildings. A complete change in the physiognomy of the quarter. That's the entrance of the railway station. That's the central piazza, that central space in between the three buildings. We can see how people can flow more naturally, more freely. There's a clear quality urban realm. And that's when we go down at street level, the enhanced communication between the two levels, concourse and street level, and enhanced entrance to the metro station. But going back to the buildings as a whole, the adventure began with the Shard around the year 2000. At the time in London, high-rise buildings were only allowed within the financial city, within the city of London, the financial district. And for the first time, the mayor at the time allowed for high-rise buildings to be built outside the financial district on transport hubs across London. And Irvine Celler, who was the investor, came with the idea to build the higher building in Europe at London Bridge, which would seem a very bizarre idea, given the nature of London Bridge at the time, which was, to say the least, a bit of a disregarded area in London. Everyone thought that he was crazy, but Renzo accepted the challenge, and then the project started. And because that high-rise building, the Shard, is not standing in a cluster of other high-rise buildings, the idea was to give it a recognizable shape, and also a shape that makes the building not imposing. And getting inspiration from the Victorian paintings, where you see all these spires emanating from the religious buildings across London. From that came the idea of having a building that is larger at the bottom, and it goes thinner as it raises up to the sky. It vanishes to the sky, and there was the idea also that the different shards forming the shape of the building would never meet each other. They would leave the end of the building open, and they would just coincide somewhere in the air, in an imaginative vanishing point. And that's the result, is that building that is larger at the bottom, and it goes thinner, and it's not imposing at all. It feels light, inviting. And then this aligned with the brief, because in the brief we had offices, hotel, and some residential. And then that shape, the lower part of the tower, adapted pretty well to the offices because it was larger. And then the top part adapted much better to the hotel and to the residential units. And then going back to the idea of movement and flow of people, there was this intention to bring the public also up the building. The building should be open to the people, should not feel like a fortress. Hence, this idea to have some floors in the middle, some floors in the middle with restaurants open to everyone, and at the very top, a viewing gallery from which to see London. It was the idea that the access of this gallery was free of charge, but the client thought otherwise. And then, because we didn't want the building to feel imposing, and we wanted for the building to feel so light, there was this idea of taking advantage of the fact that the facades are inclined, and that because they are inclined, they will have this ability to reflect the ceiling, the changing light, the changing conditions of the sky. Sorry, the ceiling of the sky, of the London sky. So we wanted to find a facade that could reflect those changing conditions of the ceiling, but not like a mirror building. It's just subtle reflection. Sometimes you can see through, sometimes you have those vivid reflections that animate the facade of the building. And then we work with a glass manufacturer, and we develop a new coating, which is around 25% reflective. And that gives that special color that the Shard facades are able to project. And this is a bit the result, where even at dusk, depending on the incoming sunlight, you may see the shards, the different planes of the shard, getting those vivid reflections. And after the Shard, once the Shard was completed, it was the turn of the News building, which was completed in 2014, with this idea that that building needed to share the DNA of the Shard. It should look of the same family, but at the same time, we wanted the building to state its own character. So we didn't want the building to have inclined facades, but still we wanted the building to reflect the sky. So in order to solve this, we opted for setting each glass pane inclined, but then to set them in a shiplap position so that the overall facade is vertical, but each glass pane is still reflecting the sky. You can see in this image the Shard facade, which is inclined, and then the news building facades, which are vertical, but each glass pane is inclined, reflecting the sky. And then finally, Shard Place. And in here, we wanted to give it a more residential look, because it's a residential building, and we needed to introduce opacity, of course. Also, we had to try to use glass in a different way. So still the same coating, still inclined glass panes, but in this case, these glass panes are very small, are louvers, and these louvers are set in a shiplap position again, and they give a very different grain to the facade of the third building. So overall, it's a complex of 3 buildings. They share a lot, they have a lot in common, and at the same time, each one of them affirms its own character. And the 3 of them as well, they have operated a complete urban transformation of London Bridge Quarter. And that takes us to the second case study, which is Marunouchi Tokyo Marine. Is the headquarters building of an insurance company in Tokyo. And it's a very special project. The client came, and they came with a very strange request. They told us that they needed a new headquarters building, but they wanted us to use as much wood as possible. Okay. The reason was that they wanted the building to be a bit of a manifest. The wood industry for large-scale buildings is not very developed in Japan, far from what is the situation in Europe, and they wanted this building to really trigger, to operate a change in the local industry. So just getting back to the building for a moment, the location is amazing. The building is right next to Tokyo Station, and in front of the Imperial Gardens. Tokyo Station is probably the most populated station in the world. And then it's a large scheme. It's 84 by 84 meters in plan, 100 meters in height. And yet, in the context of Marunouchi, the Tokyo Financial District, it looks contained. We were surrounded by so big monsters that we decided that the building had to be special for its well-balanced proportions, the lightness of the facades, and also the use of wood. And finally, the building needed to be special also for how it participates in the social life of Marunouchi, the social life of Tokyo. So going back to the question of wood, we really like to use wood, but we wanted to use it meaningfully, to make sense of it. So we start a bit of research looking for inspiration, and then we found these amazing forests that you can find in the Nagano prefecture in Japan, with these cedar trees that go up as high as 70 meters looking for the sunlight. And also we took a look at the traditional architecture in Japan, the wood column, which is a symbol of stability, of resilience. And then with all these ingredients, we came with the concept for the building. The building would be a forest of wooden columns, thicker at the bottom and thinner as they raise up to the sky. But the columns would need not only to support the building, but also to define its character. So we decided that the columns, the perimeter line of columns needed to be part of the facade, needed to show the essence of the building to everyone. And then the columns are, for the most part, protected by an external skin made of laminated glass. But then at the bottom, the columns get uncovered and they form an arcade around ground floor. And at the corner, something special happens, but because that exterior skin disappears, and then you can see it's the moment where you can see the wooden column from bottom to top uninterruptedly. These columns are very big. At the bottom, the biggest column we have is 2.5 by 2.5, all in glulam. So it's something that has never been done. It's a bit of uncharted territory. That's a mock-up that we did on site in Tokyo once the demolition was well advanced. And we were very happy with the appearance of it. It's very impressive, and we are looking forward. The first ones will be on site, erected in a year. Then I would like to step back for a second. That's a drawing done by an architect, Japanese architect called Tomoyuki Tanaka. He calls it X-ray drawings because they show what happens underground and what happens above ground all at the same time. And we can see Tokyo Station here at the center of the image. But we can also see our site on the foreground, and how in the underground, Tokyo Station connects with almost all buildings across Marunouchi. And we have that immense flow of people going both underground and above ground across the whole area of the financial district. And this is a drawing that we have done of the infrastructure. We can see Tokyo Station at the center of the image, and then we have our scheme that links Tokyo Station with the underground at the bottom of the page. And we want our building to participate in this flow of people, but we want also to offer the people an incredible experience. Hence, we have some retail units at underground level, but we also have a concert hall. And this concert hall has been designed with the best possible acoustics for chamber music and with 500 seats. And is a concert hall that is meant to be open for everyone in Tokyo. So it's a private building, but it's still a building that participates of the social life of the city. Then moving up at ground floor, the building tries to do the same thing on this level. With the core, with the vertical core set eastwards, we liberate the west, facing the Imperial Gardens for a piazza, which is open to everyone. The piazza is organized around a central patio that brings light from the very top of the building. And in this space, we can find multiple public activities. The facades of the piazza are as transparent as possible in order to blur the lines between interior and exterior and invite people in. On the west facade, we have the best space facing the Imperial Gardens, and is a perfect space for exhibitions, lectures, and small concerts. And then to the north part of the, just go back, to the north part of the patio, we have a cafe. Moving up, we have the typical floors. And again, with the core, which is offset to the east, the office floor is organized so that it faces the Imperial Gardens. And it's arranged in a way so that the main working spaces revolve around the patio. And the patio is a very nice device because it allows you to see your colleagues on the floors above and below. And the presence of these two convenient staircases allows you to move up and down and to meet your colleagues, encouraging movement and casual encounters. That's an image of the typical floor. The columns are very big, but in the scale of the building, they look perfectly in harmony and complement the interior space pretty well. And then the convenience stair that we were mentioning before that allows you to go from one floor to the other one with ease. And finally, at the top of the building, a roof forest. It's a 75 by 75 roof forest with more than 200 trees. And it's the way in which it's conceived is after the concept of Satoyama. The Japanese Satoyama is a man-made forest in the suburbs that is let to grow quite freely. It's not domesticated, it's not manicured. And we like this idea for this to feel like a forest, not to feel like a domesticated garden. And then between the ground covering plants and the bottom of the canopy of the trees, we have that layer which is occupied by the tree trunks. But in between the tree trunks, if we close a bit our eyes, we can see the city all the time behind. And at the very center of the roof forest, there's a sunken garden. And is in this place that everything stops. There's no movement anymore. And we have the tea house for the celebration of the tea ceremony. And it's there that we forget that we are in the middle of Tokyo and we only see the sky and the vegetation around us. Finally, the last case study that I wanted to present today is Paddington Square. Again, located next to one of the main train stations in London, 10 minutes north from Hyde Park, and we can see in the background of the image the Shard and the City of London, and farther back, Canary Wharf. Let's take a look at how was that bit of London before the intervention. We can see the original station. The first vaults that were built were these three on the left-hand side of the images. Those are the original vaults from 1850 by a very renowned engineer called Brunel. And the station also included that building, a Second Empire-style building, which acted as the facade of the station. This building was the facade of the station and at the same time accommodated a hotel. Later on the 20th century, it became very clear that the increase in railway traffic needed for an expansion. So that fourth vault was built on the right-hand side. And then that entrance to the station became not enough, insufficient. And then the bookend of the fourth vault became almost by mistake, by accident, the new main entrance of the station. And that's how this accidental main entrance looked like before the intervention. We have an alley going down towards that entrance, and then we have a wall on the right-hand side, and that wall accommodates the difference in level between this alley that goes down and the adjacent street that goes horizontal. And then at the end of this wall, on the foreground of the image, we have an entrance to the metro completely cramped at this corner. And that's a bit the main principle of what we wanted to do. We have the main mass of the building, which is floating off the ground level, liberating the space beneath the building for public functions. And then we demolished that wall that separated the alley from the street, and we create that gentle staircase that links two piazzas, the upper piazza and the lower piazza. Let's take a look now at what was our strategy now that we have all the people coming out from the station, and how to deal with that flux of people and how to offer to that people amenities and activities. And for that, we wanted to offer much more than the ground floor. So the first thing that we thought is that the roof of the building should be offered to the public. So at the very top of the building, we have a roof which is accessible using this set of panoramic elevators. And in here you have nice views of the city, and you have bars and restaurants. Then moving down, we have level 3. At level 3, we place the main lobby for the offices, which is also open to the public, but the advantage of having the lobby of the offices elevated from the ground is that then the ground can be given to other activities, to retail activities. Then we move down to ground floor level of the upper piazza level, where we have retail spaces that they animate all the promenade from the station up to Pride Street. And finally, that semi-basement level, which is the level of the station, where we create a retail mall that crosses the building diagonally, and it ends with an escalator so that you can go up again and find the level of the upper piazza of the Pride Street. So you give that flow of people different alternatives. You can go across the ground floor from the station to Pride Street, or you can choose to stay in this semi-basement across the retail mall and up the escalators. And that retail mall was the perfect opportunity to set the new entrance to the metro station there, going down. So now the new metro station is below the building. And this image summarizes everything we have said. We can see everything in this image. We have that set of panoramic cliffs that takes you to the roof, and which are pretty visible from the station, from the public realm. And then over this canopy, we have the sky lobby for the offices, which still participates of the public life of the building. Then below that level, and this is accessible by this set of escalators, which is also very visible. You can orient yourself pretty clearly. And then moving down, we have these two levels of retail, which are at the level of the upper piazza. And finally, in the lower piazza, the level of the station, we have the entrance to the retail mall, which is also the entrance to the underground if we take these escalators down. And here we have a series of images that show the different circulations that the lower levels of the building are offering to the public. The entrance to the retail mall and the escalators going to the sky lobby behind. Those escalators that takes you to the sky lobby. Arriving to the sky lobby, which is it's a special height because you're still very close to the ground level. You have a close relationship to the ground level, but you have a very different perspective of it. Another image of these spaces, these in-between spaces, still belonging to the ground, but floating in the air. And I also wanted to give a note on the architecture of the facades of the building, because it's a big scheme in a place where generally we find lower buildings built in stone and in brick. And because it's a big building, we don't want it to feel heavy or imposing. So the decision that we took was to using the architecture of the station as an inspiration, that lacy steel structure, that lightweight steel structure, to get inspiration from there, and then to relate the facade treatment to the architecture of the station and not to the architecture of the brick and stone buildings that we have around. And by doing that, we managed to create that lightweight mass that refers, that relates. It feels almost like the continuation of the station, and then has nothing to do with what happens at lower level. And I wanted to finish with this video that shows very clearly how with direction of a single building, you can dramatically change, you can dramatically improve the urban realm of a corner of London, and dramatically change the physiognomy of one of the main stations of the City of London. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions.
Thank you very much for your lecture. As I mentioned, you feel free to ask questions. If you are watching our stream, you can use slido.com. You can use a hashtag UrbanTalks. If you use that hashtag, I will see your questions, and you'll be able to ask Albert what you're interested in. So if you'll be interested to ask a question here in camp, you can raise your hand. I would like to ask about something that we have seen the station on the video. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the main train station in Prague, how it looks, but we have a relatively big park in front of it, and many people think that the park shouldn't be here. It's not reliable. It's not possible to keep it fresh and green and in good condition and safe, etc. What do you think about that situation? Do you think that the entrance to the city should be urbanized and without the park itself?
Well, I don't know the specifics of this train station, so I cannot give a completely informed response. I'm just going to give a generic response on the importance of greenery in the cities, in our cities nowadays. I mean, we need to be very careful every time we decide to remove greenery from the cities and substitute this for hardscape. We all know about the climate emergency, and it may be that in some years we are facing temperatures that are much higher than what we have today. And we already know that the presence of greenery is going to be one of our key tools in order to counteract that rise of temperature. So generally, I would say we should be probably trying to change our paradigm of what the city needs to be. Right now, the city incorporates greenery as a bit of decoration. It's a nice addition, but it's not something structural in our cities. And I think we need to tend to cities where the greenery is something much more present and much more essential in the tissue of the cities. So that's something very important. And by changing the paradigm, I mean that our idea of nature is one that in the city you expect the nature to be quite domesticated. You'll feel strange if the vegetation may grow a bit more freely. But if we change the paradigm and we need cities that are more, let's say, in between spaces, then we need to embrace that idea of nature being more freely used in our urban spaces.
Mm-hmm. So I'll ask you if anyone is interested to ask questions. Feel free to raise your hand. Great, thank you. Welcome to camp.
Thank you very much. My question concerns the fact that you showed some examples of private buildings that have some parts that are also open to the public. And of course, in the project, it sounds great, but how is your own experience with that? Are those parts that are originally meant for the public really adopted by the public? And maybe do you incorporate some, or like, do you think about it when you design the building that you have to incorporate some, I don't know, inviting elements into the design so the people are not afraid to actually, you know, like go into this building even though it's, I don't know, a private company or a bank or whatever, and to seek those places that are also meant for them and not just the employees? Thank you.
So yeah, we have shown 3 private buildings, but our drive is really for all the buildings we do to participate in the social life of the city. And I think that perhaps it's by chance, but we tend to find clients that are of the same view to a certain extent. And then when you look at the chart, I think it was in the interest of the client. I mean, in London, it happened something that is quite interesting. It's that you have planning approval, and that's a process where you need to establish a sort of trade-off with the city. You have the right to build, but you have to give something in exchange to the city. It's called Section 104. And that negotiation with the local authority, it's the perfect opportunity for the building to give something back to the city for good, because otherwise you don't have the right to build it. So you can see the amount of work that is given to the public realm with the building, with the erection of the 3 buildings at London Bridge. It changes completely a space which is absolutely open to the public. And it's a bit of a trade-off that is beneficial to everyone. In the case of the Tokyo project, the client is an important institution in Tokyo and in Japan. So it's also in their interest that their home is also the home of the Tokyoites. And they agreed with us that if we want the building to represent Tokyo to a certain extent, as the New York Times building represents New York, or the chart may embody the idea of London, if we want for this building to do the same, you need to open it to the public. And that's the reason why there's a concert hall and the ground floor is fully open to the Tokyoites with public activities, and how the building is imagined to participate in the civic life of the city.
Okay, thank you very much. The experience from Tokyo that you showed us, it's the accommodation of the new building in the area that is so dense, and there are buildings everywhere, and there is a massive infrastructure on the ground. It's something that we experience through the Vltava Philharmonic Hall here in Prague, and it's not, of course, it's different, different size of the project, of course, and it's not that complicated. But sometimes people say that it's too complicated to try to realize it, to make it, too complicated to invest into it, because we can't do the Philharmonic Hall with the right acoustics, and there is no space for it, etc., etc. Is it something that we should challenge ourselves with? Is it something that we should try? Is it something that it helps us to find a new ways how to do constructions in these dense areas, etc.? Do you think it's something we should try, or should we say, okay, let's build the building somewhere where space, don't do it in the more expensive way, more complicated way? What's a better way for you? What do you think that creates the better projects? Is there pressure that helps you to, think out of the box, etc.?
Well, in the case of Tokyo, I think you already have a site where a building was already there, so it's pretty normal to erect a new building in that position, and the urban fabric is meant to have a building there. So I think there's no question about it. In general terms, that sort of dialectic between should we opt for something denser, liberate areas outside of the cities, or we expand the cities everywhere. I think that we need to find the correct balance. We know that the high-rise buildings, there's a moment where the effort that you need to do them, because they are too high, is immense, and this is in terms of materials that we need to use, carbon emissions associated with the erection of this building. So I think my impression is that density is a good thing, because we can liberate land for other activities or for nature to grow, but that density needs to find its proper limits and its proper balance.
So, would you like to ask some questions? You have a chance. Yes. Welcome to camp. You get a microphone. Thank you.
Thank you for the lecture. I'm curious, in the case of Paddington in London, as such a central location and important transportation node, has there been any public participation, and how did that impact, if there was, how did it impact the project?
So, as I was saying before, the buildings in London go through that planning approval process, and that's when you really have exchanges with the elected people in the administration, people that represent the borough in this case. And I think that this is a very nice process because it really affects the building. So you enter the planning approval process with a certain scheme, and then you finish that planning approval process with something that generally is better and is more it gives more to the city. You know?
For Mike, please.
And was general public included in the conversation?
Yeah, normally as part of the planning approval, the other thing that we have done in all the buildings that we have built in London is that you do a public exhibition. And then there's a moment where even everyone can, well, you present physically, you organize an exhibition. People are free, this is announced, people are free to come to get to know the project. They can ask questions to the architect, you respond to the questions, and then they can also leave their comments to the architect, but also more formally to the authorities. So the planning approval process is something quite nice because there's this democratic participation of everyone concerned.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another question, thank you. Welcome to camp.
Hello, thank you for the lecture. You spoke about the importance of choosing the materials for the buildings, and I noticed that in all of the examples you used mostly or really put a lot of emphasis on glass. So I wanted to know what was the decision behind the frequent usage of this material. Is it purely for aesthetics, or are there other components that influence this repeated decision? Thank you.
No, I think this choice responds to the brief and to how the building works. In the previous slides that I've shown before, when we were exploring these three concepts, we have seen buildings with all shapes and materials. And in here, because we are dealing with three office buildings, and the three of them with very large floor plates, all of them compact buildings with very large floor plates, then the glass is what allows us to bring as much light into those deep floor plates, and also offer views out for the people that are inhabiting the buildings, working in these buildings. So no, the decision was meant for these three buildings because of this.
Okay. Anyone else? I would like to ask about because it was from I think it was in the first question, the inviting people to accommodate those buildings when they are partly public, for example. When you have a building like Shard, it's of course a huge building, but when I go around it, when I go around the complex, I only can visit the part of it, and it's the street level that I'm about to visit. What is the key moment when you are deciding how the street level of this building, of this complex would look like? Is it something that works always, that always accommodate people, always welcome people to join, or you have to work hardly with the context of the city when you place that building? Because if you have any say, tricks how to do it. Because in public space, in Prague, for example, we know that when you place somewhere a chair, in 5 minutes there is someone sitting on it without hesitation. So if there is something that you say about the street level on these buildings, these iconic buildings?
Yes, there's this common thread. No, the lower levels need. It's where the building touches the ground. It's where the building touches the public realm. So it's there where you can invite people in. It's in that moment where the building interacts primarily with people. Obviously, we can see the building from afar, and it's the silhouette, it's the shape of it. But then, when you are there, what do you feel? What do you touch? That's the ground floor. And then what we tend to do is, especially for this type of buildings, is to offer ground floors that are very transparent and very inviting, because people naturally are brought into the building. And the other thing, as we have seen, is that very often we not only mobilize the ground floor, but we can also mobilize the first basement or the second floor, and then we give complexity to that interaction with the public realm.
What do you do to make these buildings recognizable? Because you can recognize them in the skyline, for example, but Empire State Building is not recognizable. It's a whole block in Manhattan. But for example, One World Center is solitaire in the middle of the plaza. What do you do to be recognizable on the street level?
There's no pretension for the building to be recognizable. I think the building may become recognizable, if you want, when it has been there, and if ever we have the chance that the people end up loving the building, then there's that recognition that in a way results of this love for the building, and that happens not immediately. The Pompidou Center was one of the most hated buildings in architectural history, probably, at the beginning, and then Parisians learned to love the building, and now it's a loved building. The Shard, there was even a public inquiry against the building. Paddington, exactly the same. So hate and love, it's part of the process, and I think that the building is only recognizable by the people because they at some point they adopted it as part of their work.
So I will ask you if you have any questions. Maybe the last one. Anyone? Maybe I have one. Yes? No? Yes? Okay. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for the lecture. I would ask you, you built in multiple cities, and in each of them you probably had to deal with local authorities. Each have different requirements, constraints. From the position of an architect, how do you deal with the conversation, still approaching the design with some personal aspects, personal artistic visions, etc., and still negotiating with it within the local authorities, the clients, etc.?
Yeah, so that's a bit, we go back to the idea of workshop and that incredible journey from your first ideas, which are not almost no conditioned by any constraint, and the final result. And I think in the process, again, we dealing with the authorities or with the realities of what can be done in terms of engineering. All these constraints form part of the story, of the history of the project, how the project evolves. And we tend to embrace all of these elements because they form part of the journey. And normally the final building is in the end better because all these influences, including aligning the building with code, than if you don't have any constraint and you just implement your great initial idea. Then it's true that from one building to the other, from one country to the other, the constraints change dramatically. I was thinking before of the fact that, for instance, in London, it doesn't have a very strict code, and you can negotiate lots of things with the local authorities, with the officers. But in relation with fire, for instance, everything changed dramatically after the Grenfell Tower fire. We were in the middle of building, starting to build Shard Place, the third of the buildings in London Bridge Quarter, and that fire changed the mindset radically. And what was before, let's say, flexibility, was now a more harsher attitude against fire engineered solutions than we had before. So it changes dramatically. So each project is an adventure, and each location is an adventure in itself, and that's part of the journey, I would say.
Maybe I'll ask the last thing. How that changed the onboarding the studio, like Renzo Piano Building Workshop? How that changed from the era when you joined the studio in 2009, and what you were looking for in that era and what you're looking for now in case of talents and people at all?
I would like to start for what it hasn't changed, and what it hasn't changed is the work ethos, is that working process of taking each building as an opportunity to discover something new, taking every building as a journey, as an adventure, and that discipline of iterating options in order to find the perfect solution. And that process to take it to the very end, to construction, not just concept design. It's a whole journey where you are interrogating systematically what's the best option for the building. And that's something that remains. I think the office was founded based on these principles, and we still operate based on these work ethos. What changes is the technologies we have. We adopt new technologies, we adopt the new rendering tools, we also obviously adopt the new challenges, but we still work in the same way. We take these as tools and we put them in our working system. So I think for the future will be what I would like to dream is that we will keep inventing buildings, and each building will bring something new into the architectural panorama, if you want. Each building will contribute with something that isn't expected, and we I think we'll be able to find that something special for each building, thanks to that process that we still continue to use.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to have you here, Albert Gérald.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So thank you very much for your questions and for your time. And if you'll be interested to see the record of the lecture, you will find it on Camp, and you will find it on our website with a short interview that we made with Albert before. So thank you very much.